So this is the 2017 update. We've been doing these for a few years. The IHE PCD domain is what is referred to as a mature domain, in that we don't produce as high a quantity of new profiles each cycle, but we do go back and update the profiles as needed, progressing them to, and you may have heard of this, final text status. This is where it's been verified across all actors, transactions, for a couple of IHE PCD connectathons, and you have a stable profile that others can develop to in large numbers. But we also have a few that are at trial implementation status, and that's good for testing out vendor implementations and for connectathons. So as we progress the profiles and the technical framework, we create and ballot and approve change proposals, or CPs. We update the PCD technical framework for the profiles that are at final text. We do CPs to the PCD TF as well. We publish updated versions of some profiles that are at trial implementation status. We have a couple of those coming out this cycle. We are working with the IEEE P 1847 Working Group on Location Services for Healthcare. They're focusing on common terminology and the technology associated with location identification. And we've pretty much got the means of communicating that data within healthcare already within the MEM-LS profile within PCD. As I mentioned earlier, there's the point of care identity management. It's a new white paper, and we're hoping to come up with a trial implementation of that for this cycle. Another white paper is the medical equipment management remote device communication. We're also working with the folks that produce the maintenance on 11073-10101 to include new nomenclature for medical device management for DMC and MEM-LS, as well as there's a very large workup of all the alarms, alerts, and events across devices and device types. We're looking to get that terminology into that update as well. The information may arrive in the Rosetta Terminology Mapping Maintenance System, RTMMS, that is hosted by NIST, before it winds up in a balloted standard, but that's our means of communicating the information such that it can be utilized by vendors and by the testing tools that NIST creates for connectathons and demonstrations. So the first white paper is Medical Equipment Management Remote Device Control. If I need to communicate to a device to change its behavior, that's essentially what we're calling remote device control. We're trying to create a generic means of doing this outside of a specific device type and specific use case so that it can be used uniformly as we come up with new use cases. So it essentially has a message going to the device to say, I'd like you to do this, and a response coming back with details saying, I've either done that, I don't like what you've asked me to do, or here's the details on the request. The white paper approach first before a profile allows us to create focus. So we can have a focus on device security and patient safety without looking at the nuances of a specific use case. We also have the identification of credentials for the requester, the destination, command acknowledgments and responses. We look at it as closed loop, as in there's a request, verification, and a response. We look at it as identifying the contextual information to make it easier to use through human interfaces. We'd like things to be nice and tightly secure for patient safety and data security, but at the same time, some of that information is not readily known about by the clinical staff that may be initiating the request. And then the white paper approach allows us to perform an initial feasibility for demonstration, and we can work out issues or cover anything that we find before it becomes an actual IHE profile. So we'd like to focus on a limited set of non-controversial use cases. There's a lot of use cases out there for remote device control. There is some prior art that we're paying attention to. But the end result is we'd like to do this in a more generic fashion initially to get all the issues ironed out. And so we're focusing on 3 very straightforward use cases, which is pausing an audio alert. That's not stopping the alert. That's not canceling the alert. That's just saying, as if you walked up to the device and you said audio pause, the alert is still outstanding. You still have to resolve it. But if you happen to be a clinician that receives via the ACM profile a notification on your mobile device and you're down the hall, you'd like to reduce the noise in the care unit by silencing it, but leaving the alert active so that you can ultimately still have the accountability to resolve the issue. So that's the idea of the pause audio alert. The reset displayed infusion thus far is a matter of logging. Clinicians have to go to the devices and make note of the amount infused thus far. And in order to remind them to do this, there is a means of resetting on the display how much has been infused thus far, so that you can have sort of a waypoint along the way. But this provides a means of not only resetting the displayed infusion thus far, but also returning status, that device response, which says, I've done that, and here's the checkpoint that I was at when you asked me to do that. So you can log that information, so you have a record. So it kind of dovetails into the previous profile I discussed called IPEC. So you have infusion event communication. And also unlocking a device panel. Many times there'll be a supervisory role where an individual will know a particular unlock code in order to unlock a panel to do work on a device. If that can be delegated to another individual, you'd like to do so without sort of communicating that unlock code. So if I can remotely unlock it in order to let someone else do the actual work on the device, then that's the purpose of this. And as I said, we do focus in the white paper on device security and patient safety. So you need to know who's doing something, why they're doing it, and log all that information. This is another new area that we're working on, point of care identity management. Think of it as we're PCD domain, so we're focused on devices and patient association with those devices. So that's what this PCIM is focusing on, is the association of a patient to a device, how that information is communicated such that you have the right patient, right devices, right time. So every measurement made, every observation is communicated and stored into a chart, and that every measurement made is stored into a chart, and that every patient-affecting device command is sent to the correct device. Without this level of association, identification, and recording, you can have unlinked information. You can have improper associations. You can have associations that haven't been established, and therefore there's no way to store the data. It creates a lot of error. It creates a lot of after the observation work in order to map this and store it. So we're filling in what we see as shortcomings in the current approach to doing things. If you think of other domains within IHE, there is a lot of patient association with information for reports, for example. The ITI domain does do a great job in doing that for reports, and they also manage things like the admit, discharge, and transfer information. So when we went to do this, we had to think about where is the information being sourced from? How is the information made use of? How better can we get access to this information? So we had to think about associations as having a beginning and end, associations as having workflows. There's people involved, there's devices involved, there's communications involved. How best to get this information communicated with the least possible opportunity for error. So using barcodes, using RFID for the identification of patients, devices, and staff. Using information that's available based upon what we know of that information. So we can use the profiles that the ITI domain has done for associating the patient. So patient administration management, or PAM, or patient encounter management. Using that information from the ITI profiles allows us to sort of get a leg up on this information. Recognizing that you need to have multiple approaches to getting the information. So if it's something that's in fixed association with a patient location, such as a bed or a nurse call panel, they don't move around. So you can typically rely upon the ADT association with those. If it's a mobile device, the patient is walking around with an infusion pump. Well, that's a mobile form of communication of the data. So you'd like to be aware that the mobile association can take place. And then the transient ones, walking around with the device from patient to patient. The period of time when the association starts, observations are created, and when the association is discontinued. So the beginning to end. We do make use of an extension to HL7 version 2.6, the participate segment. It gives us a better association definition, so we know the person, we know how they're participating, we know device information, and we also extend that out to HL7 2.8.2 for the new FDA Universal Device Identification information, so we can carry that information along in the communication. The idea is to create a single authoritative source for the device-to-patient associations, the Device-Patient Association Manager, for recording those associations as they're produced in other systems, the Device-Patient Association Reporters, and then for how to respond to queries for that information from other systems that are sort of coming onto the scene or want to know the data, the Device-Patient Association Consumers. So the white paper pays attention to all of these aspects. So it identifies the device registrant as a system, device, or person, identifying that a device may participate in an association. And then we have the patient registration system as a system that identifies patients that may participate in associations. So it's not just the messaging communication, it's not just how you would go about doing it, it's identifying the generic actors that are part of the use case and the workflow.